You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast. It is episode 79 of season 3. Unfortunately, the end of the 2024 Cubs season. Don't forget to listen, download, review, most importantly, subscribe to the podcast. Follow on all the socials, Fly the W670, Twitter, Instagram. Of course, we are on Facebook. Email Crawly and I, Fly the W670 at gmail.com. All right, Crawly, Cubs were at the Reds for the final 3 games of the season, all 120. Except for Sunday, the 2:00 start across the board. Let's run through the games, but overall, how was your weekend at Wrigley?
Well, Saturday I was with Sammy Sosa, and we're going to have plenty to talk about in the offseason about the Club 400 party with Sammy Sosa. That was Saturday. I don't know if you saw on Friday, he donated $10,000 to the firemen of Chicago. He donated $10,000 to the police of Chicago for the officers that have died in the line of duty. And then we had the big party Saturday. Couldn't have been a nicer guy. I had so much fun with him. He was just fantastic with everybody. And then went to the game on Sunday with my wife, 25th last home game of the season for me. So
now, is that in that game? Do you sit in your seats actually, or you're out in the bleachers?
I sit in my seats probably in 75% of the games I go to. The bleachers. 25.
Okay. I was just curious because I saw the couple things from that. I saw that the left field got a couple $100 from
Ian
Happ to buy beers, and then I saw the potluck going on in left field bleachers, I think.
Yeah, the potluck's always tradition, and then Ian Happ, this is the second year he's done that, where he's wrapped a couple $100 bills on a ball, thanks to fans, and throws it to Bleacher Jeff, who then proceeds to buy beers for everybody on behalf.
He didn't put it in his send Bleacher Jeff to Japan fund.
No. That I can guarantee you, based on everybody's behavior after the game, that those were spent on beers.
Gotcha. And are we going to have Bleacher Jeff on to try to help him get to Japan?
Bleacher Jeff is always welcomed, but he's doing the fundraiser is doing pretty good. I think he'll be in Japan without a problem.
Okay, well, very good. Good for him. Good for Jeff. Good for Cubs fans. All right, so let's go over the final afternoon game. Friday, 1:20 start. Friday, nice day. Jameson Taillon had a nice start.
Yeah, Dustin, this was the one that I was, I said when I was picking my predictions, I think I had the Reds taking 2 or 3. This was the one. I thought Taillon would pitch good. I thought Nick Martinez would be outstanding. And I thought that the Cubs bullpen would be the one that would give it up. And, I knew it would be a pitcher's duel because the wind was blowing in at 25 miles per hour at Wrigley. So fun start to the game. Bottom of the first, one out. Elly De La Cruz doubles. And the ball kind of is slicing to left center. Neither PCA or Ian Happ can make the play. But PCA never gives up on it, continues to follow the ball, picks it up, guns it to third, and De La Cruz is thrown out at third for the second out of the inning. Dustin, like I said, when you got nothing to root for, to see 2 exciting young kids like PCA and Elly De La Cruz involved in a bang-bang play like that, to me, that's really exciting. So I'm glad that happened. Just got
that was exciting. No doubt about it. Yep.
Now, J-Mo runs in a little trouble in the top of the second. Spencer Steer hits one down the left field line. Looks like it's going to be extra bases, but Isaac Paredes makes a phenomenal stop, throws Steer out. J-Mo walks the next 2 batters, but Tommy Hotovy came out, did one of his magical talks, and Taillon got the next 2 batters to fly out. That would be the last time J-Mo would be in trouble, as the Reds did not have another runner reach second base after the second inning. Taillon gave up singles in the 3rd, 6th, and 7th. That was it. Pitched 7 innings, gave up 4 hits, only 1 extra base hit. That was De La Cruz, who was credited with the double, but thrown out at third. 2 outs and 2 Ks. Now, I told you about Nick Martinez has been lights out for the month of September, better than Taillon. And Friday was no different. He pitched 8 innings, gave up 1 run, 5 hits.
He was pretty good too. It was almost like a playoff game. I mean, honestly, when you talk about starting pitching and whatnot.
Oh, it's phenomenal. And they only gave up 1 extra base hit and a walk and 3 Ks. The only mistake he made, bottom of the 5th, Nico leads off with a double. PCA with a great bunt down the first base side.
Great bunt.
To move Nico to third. And then Miguel Amaya hit a weak fly ball. Jake Fraley has to make a tough catch on a sinking fly ball. Great send by Willie Harris. If the throw is on line towards the third base side, he's out, but it's on the first base side. So the Cubs take a 1-0 lead. And I don't have a problem with Willie Harris on the send on that because it's a tough day to score runs,
Yeah, that makes sense. I would agree with that. Mm-hmm.
Cubs had 5 hits, 1 extra base hit, that double by Nico, 4 singles. They were 0 for 1 with runners in scoring position. Nico had 2 hits, a double, and a single. Happ had a single, but was wiped out on a double play. Amaya had a single, and PC had one in the 8th, but was picked off of first. Luckily, the Cubs bullpen was able to lock it down. Tyson Miller and Porter Hodge each pitched an inning, gave up no hits, no walks. Each had a strikeout. Miller had his 15th hold, and Hodge picked up his 8th save. Dustin, I'm really, I hope, last year we were kind of looking at young guys and making big contributions to the bullpen, and it didn't really happen. But I really hope that Porter Hodge and Tyson Miller are 2 guys that can come back and be a big part of this bullpen for next year.
Yeah, you're a big Tyson Miller guy. I like Porter Hodge. Not sure he's ready for big time, prime time, absolute massive high leverage. Well, we're going to have to wait and see. Saturday, a very special day. Kyle Hendricks taking the ball in what many think will be his last game, and the way things went looked like potentially his last game.
Yeah, the professor versus Rhett Lauder, and boy, did he put on a masterclass performance like only the professor would. Dustin, it was a love fest for Kyle, the last player from the World Series 2016 team still on the roster. Standing ovation when he went to the bullpen to warm up. Standing ovation when he came out of the He walked Jonathan India in the 3rd, but then he sat down the next 11 batters. 1 out, top of the 7th. He walks Spencer Sear, gives up a single to TJ Friedl, put runners at 1st and 2nd with 1 out, but he'll get Ty France and Jake Fraley to fly out to end the threat. That would be the only time, the 7th inning, when the Reds would have a base runner in scoring position. Top of the 8th, Kyle gets Santiago Espial to ground out for the 1st out. Then the class move, Craig Counsell has Tommy Hotovy get Kyle Hendricks out of the game. And so Hendricks was hugged by Tommy and his teammates, and obviously just a huge standing ovation, not a dry eye in the house. And so, I'm just, that to me by Craig Counsell, total class move on that. And just, here's what Tommy Hotovy, who always is on the Mully and Haugh show, here's what he had to say about that moment.
When we were talking through like how to do this the right way for Kyle, and give him an opportunity to let the fans, show their love and support and admiration for what he's done for this organization. And like part of that was going to be to take him out kind of mid inning. And, we were talking through how the game was going. And then, we were like, all right, we'll give him one more hitter in the 8th inning and let him have that moment. And then he got the out, and the counselor's like, go. He starts yelling at me to go. And I'm like, what? I'm like, I'm not going. He's like, go, you're going. And I was like, all right. So I come down the steps, and I start going up the steps, and I stop. I turn, and I go, I'm not going out there. But then he kind of he forced me to go out there, and I really appreciated the opportunity to get to do that. It's like, just being around Kyle for as long as I have. I mean, he was, we were technically teammates in 14 in spring training, and then getting to be with him from 15 until now, it's 10 years of watching him grow as a player and getting to see the highs, the lows, all the things that we do. And I said this the other day, like, what he does on the field, what he's done in his career on the field speaks for himself. But for me, it's like way more getting to spend time with him off the field, in the bullpens, around the clubhouse, around the players. That's going to mean a lot to me. So being able to go out there for that moment was definitely special.
So, Dustin, as you heard, Hotovy had been working with Hendricks almost his entire career. Hotovy was signed as a pitcher for the Cubs in 2014, minor league pitcher for Iowa, and he was let go and in April, and his playing career was over. But he was, with Kyle in spring training, Kyle's first year, and then Hotovy joined the coaching staff in 2015 as the run prevention coordinator and became the pitching coach in 2019. So, like I said, I love moments like that in baseball. And for Kyle pitching 7 1/3 scoreless innings, gave up 2 hits, 2 walks, 2 Ks. What a way to go out.
Yeah, excellent way to go out. If indeed he does go out, and I know we're going to get into what we see moving in the future, or what we would like to see, and we're going to react to what Jed Hoyer had to say later in the podcast. But I wouldn't necessarily bet that his days at Wrigley as a Cub are over. Of course, we'll have to wait and see for sure. But that's a tease. We'll get into that a little bit later on. Okay, but then Tyson Miller came in later on in the game, right?
Yeah. On the other side, Rhett Lauder pitched 5 shutout innings, gave up 3 hits, 3 walks, and 1 K. But the Cubs offense got to the Reds' pen in the bottom of the 8th. Dansby led off with a double. Former Cub Justin Wilson comes out of the pen. Cody Bellinger singled. Willie Harris holds up Dansby, a center fielder. TJ Friedel was ready to throw home, but Cody Bellinger snuck into second base on that play. Sayas intentionally walked to load the bases. Isaac Paredes pinch hit for Michael Busch, and he singled to put the Cubs on the board 1-0. Wilson's day is done. Alex Diaz comes out of the pen. Nico grounds out to Ellie De La Cruz, who threw out Bellinger at home. Base is still loaded with 1 out. PCA singles to keep the line moving. Cubs up 2-0. And then Mike Tauchman doing what Mike Tauchman does. Bases loaded, walk. Cubs take a 3-0 lead. And like you said, Tyson Miller pitched 2/3 of an inning, picked up the win. Porter Hodge again gets his 9th save of the season as the Cubs win this one 3-0. Cubs scored 3 hit runs on 8 hits while the Reds were shut out with only 3 hits. Dustin, like I said, how can you not be romantic about baseball? After disastrous April and May, he ends up in the bullpen, ERA around 11, gets back in the rotation. He has an ERA over 6 most of the season. And in his last game, he pitches a gem. And you ask about the future of Kyle Hendricks. This is what Kyle said after the game.
Yeah, that's tough to say. Obviously, if I had my choice, I would love to be a Chicago Cub, obviously. But that's so tough. This organization is in such a good spot. We have so many good young arms coming up. And in this game, you got to perform. You got to perform to be in a winning culture and winning atmosphere. So I just didn't do it this year. Didn't have a great year. So there's ramifications for that. And so, could end up somewhere else. I'm obviously going to keep pitching. I just love the game, love baseball. So, the door isn't closed here, but just the way things happen, it's most likely going to end up being somewhere else. And it is what it is. Just going to always have these memories to look back on, all the great teammates I've had along the road. Those are the things I'm always going to remember.
Boy, most likely somewhere else. So I wonder if, they've already told him, look, no matter what, thanks, but no thanks.
I mean, Kyle has that Ivy League degree. He knows. I mean, you can't sit there with what the Cubs are doing and with the young arms that they got. They're not going to give him the kind of deal that he wants to get. He's got to think about, obviously, his livelihood. He wants to pitch. He wants an opportunity to pitch. And, it was a tough season. I mean, are you telling me, how much would you want to give him? And then you're telling me no other team would want to give him that. And even then, do you really want to block guys like Ben Brown or,
well, but again, there's lots of
Jordan
questions still, Ben Brown. Okay. What's going on with Ben Brown? Right. He needs to have surgery, right? Doesn't he? He's going to be ready to go. He's going to be ready to log a bunch of innings.
I just think that there's other options that you could do. And I think that it's really hard to say, hey, I want to have a guy that throws an 87-mile-per-hour fastball. I know Jamie Moyer did it for a long time. Greg Maddux is in a different otherworldly category. For Kyle, I think it's just really tough with the way that the game is going to be able to continue to pitch the style he's pitching. Again, I'm sure if you can pick up somewhere like the Oakland A's, right? Or, even the Oakland A's have a lot of good young pitching, but there's teams that would take a flyer on him. You saw Jason Hayward's in the postseason, right? So I don't see it being with the Cubs. I really don't. I'd be shocked, not saying it couldn't happen, but if you told me the odds, I would say 90% chance he's not coming back.
All right, 90% not coming back. Another guy that may or may not be coming back, I guess. He'll be back, but in what role, was the Game 3 starter, Caleb Killian. I think they did the right thing, and they did not have Shota go in a meaningless start.
No Shota. It was Justin's turn in the rotation. Justin Steele. They didn't have either of those guys go. Went with Caleb Killian versus Hunter Green. Cubs were hoping for a bounce back start from Caleb. Killian dealt with injuries all season, made his first start last Monday and gave up 5 runs on 8 hits in 5 2/3 inning. Hunter Green was on the bump for the Reds. He missed most of August and September with a sore right elbow. He wanted to go out strong. And so we had a pitcher's duel again at Wrigley. The wind was blowing slightly and more left to right than 15 miles per hour. Key moment in the bottom of the second. Green walks the first 2 batters, Busch and Paredes. PCA, another nice bunt, moves him to second and third, but Hunter Green gets Christian Bethancourt to pop out and Kevin Alcantara to ground out to end the threat. Bethancourt just had a brutal game. Remember how he was like Mr. Clutch for a little bit?
Yeah. Little bit. Keyword, right? Little bit.
Hey, that's baseball, right? You're going to come back to earth. Cubs had one more chance to get to Hunter Green. Bottom of the 4th, Seiya Suzuki singles. Michael Busch walks. He had 4 of those that day. Runners at first and second, no out. Paredes lines out to right. PCA flies out to center. Both runners advance to 90 feet, but Green gets Christian Bethancourt to strike out on a high fastball to end the threat. For Green, he would pitch 4 innings, gave up 1 hit, 3 walks, 3 Ks. Caleb Killian, though, good bounce back start he was looking for. Pitched 5 innings, a scoreless ball, gave up 3 hits, 2 walks, and 4 Ks. Battle of the bullpens. Hayden Wesniewski pitched 2 innings, only gave up 1 hit. Drew Smiley came out in the 8th, gave up a single, got 2 outs, but Craig Counsell wasn't playing around. He got Keegan Thompson. He came in, he walked the first battery face, but then while pitching against Spencer Steer, Keegan injured something in his leg. He had to be helped off the field. I thought that was very poetic for the Cubs to have another injury on the last day of the season.
Right.
Nate Pearson took over, threw 1 pitch to strike Steer out. The Cubs offense couldn't do anything against the Reds pen. We get into the 10th inning, no score. Ethan Roberts comes
10th inning,
into
no
the game,
score. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And now Noel V. Marte is the Manfred man on second, and Roberts catches him napping, picks him off second, and the crowd goes wild. Fortunately, that wouldn't last long. Luke Maley would hit a leadoff single, and Jonathan India walked to put runners at first and second for Ellie De La Cruz with no outs. He hits a triple down the right field line, 2-run score. Now with De La Cruz on third, the Cubs infield moves in. Tyler Stevenson hits a ground ball to center. Reds make it 3-0, and that was the final. The Reds were able to score 3 runs on 9 hits, while the Cubs were shut out for the 15th time this season. Only 3 hits. They were 0 for 10, Dustin, with runners in scoring position. But
that sounds familiar. That sounds familiar.
How about this? I think that this last weekend of the Cubs played baseball was a good microcosm of the season.
Amen. I think you're onto something there, Crawly.
Starters pitching with runners in scoring position. That's a 157 average for those of you keeping track at home. The one loss was on the bullpen. There was a bullpen injury. Again, that to me was the whole story of the 2024 Cubs. They finished with a record of 83-79, tied for second place in the NL Central with the Cardinals, 10 games behind the division champion Brewers, and have now not gone to a postseason in 4 years.
Yeah, that's rough to swallow. 4 years, no postseason for our favorite team in the National League and all of baseball for that matter. You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast, season 3, episode 79, the end of the 2024 Cubs season. Don't forget to listen, download, review, subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. Feel free, leave us a 5-star review. You can email us, flythew670@gmail.com. Don't forget, you can watch Crawly and I do this on the 670 The Score YouTube page. So, Crawly, yesterday, Jed Hoyer met with the media to discuss a disappointing 2024 season. We're going to break down some of that press conference, see what is going on in the mind of the Cubs president of baseball operations, Jed Hoyer.
Yeah, I covered a long range of wide range of topics, and some of the things we kind of figured, but other things I kind of like slapped my head. Like when we talked about the beginning of the year of things that we were worried about with the Cubs, all of those pretty much came to fruition. You know what I mean? So definitely some interesting stuff here, but we'll go ahead and get started with some of this breakdown. I know not everybody gets marquee. Not everybody gets, some of the inference. So the first question he's talked about is to compare last year to this year. Dustin, it was the exact same record, right? So you're sitting here. Well, what was similar? What was different? So this is what Jed had to say.
When I think about our season and where we are, I'm disappointed, but optimistic. I think anytime you set a goal for yourself and you fall short of that goal, I think there's disappointment. I think from the top down this year, the expectation was to play in the playoffs, and we didn't get there. And we have to be better, to move beyond 83 and 79, 2 consecutive years. We need to be better to get beyond that. But I'm really excited about next year. I think we're building from a really great foundation going forward. And we need to get back to the postseason for these fans. I think that's what the fans deserve, and we'll get there.
So, when he's talking there, did you feel anything like confident, like how things are going to improve here?
No, I don't necessarily understand what the plan is. I mean, that specific cut, no. And I don't know why, as a Cub fan, like you and I are, and everybody listening is, why we should feel good, because they're getting money off the books and because they have a rich farm system and baseball equity is in a farm system. Okay, but they have like very little ability to do any kind of movement because everybody is under control or has no trade clauses. Basically, all you can do is trade your borderline Gold Glove second baseman. That's like the only thing you can do right now.
Right. And obviously one of the big things that are going to have an issue as far as next season is concerned is Cody Bellinger and his opt-out. So when we talk about that situation, that's where it kind of gets even more confusing because nobody really knows what Cody's going to do just yet. So here's Jed on the opt-out.
For these fans, I think that's what the fans deserve, and we'll get there. When we signed that deal in late February, we knew that if he had a good year, we knew that he would have a lot of options, and he had a good year. And so I think he'll have options. Obviously he didn't have quite the year he had last year. Last year he was an MVP candidate. I think, but when you look at the totality of the year he had, I think he had roughly an 800 OPS on the road. I think his home OPS was 200 points lower than last year, and that's kind of how Wrigley played. So I expect him to have a lot of options. Obviously, that will impact team building. I think this figuring out what positions we're filling, and he is versatile, but it'll have an impact. But like I said, I expect he'll have a bunch of options given how he played this year.
Do you feel that way, Dustin? Like he's gonna have a whole bunch of options that are gonna be worth it to opt out?
Well, he can play multiple positions. He hit pretty well other places than Wrigley, but he's got 60-ish, right? 55, 60-ish million still guaranteed by the Cubs if he decides for the 2 opt-ins. Is somebody out there willing to give him 3 years and $100 million? And is that somewhere that he even wants to go to? I think every year these players get older, unless you're going to sign a $200 or $300 million contract. I don't know if there's much difference between 60 and 90 million. I mean, for us, that's a huge amount of money. But when you've already made $500 million probably playing baseball, I don't know if the 30 million is enough to decide to change your whole lifestyle around. If you have found friends, if you've grown in the community, if you have a young family, it might be reason to stick around. Now, the other thing that I think it's important, I just found this out today, within 5 days of the World Series being done, he has to let the Cubs know what he is doing. He can let them know as soon as the final out of the World Series, but after 5 days, so by November 7th at the absolute latest, 7th or 8th, I don't know about the semantics of it all, but the last Game 7 of the World Series is Saturday, November 2nd, if needed. So by then, everybody's going to know which way it's going, and I think that's going to really be your compass, I think, to this Cubs off season.
No, I don't want to put it in the same category, but Cody Bellinger is one of those guys that you say, boy, when he's healthy, he's all great, comeback player of the year last year, right?
Right.
But it always seems to be something.
Right.
And he had a broken finger this year. That's not his fault. And he had other issues too that end up happening. It's just the guy can't stay healthy. And when you talk about options for the Cubs, this is a big one right here. If he opts out, then you have more wiggle room to kind of do different things. But if he doesn't, like you said, Nico is really the guy that everybody's looking at. That's the one that everyone's talking about.
Do you as a fan, Crawly, want him to opt out, or do you want him to opt in? I mean, nothing's going to change. Like he had his season. We know what the numbers are. Maybe we don't know, maybe we haven't taken a hard look at free agency from a DH right fielder standpoint. Because listen, center field is set. First base, pretty much set, unless they trade Michael Busch, which I don't know why you would do that, but that's a possibility. You could trade him, so if Cody Bellinger is batting third and playing right field, how do you feel about that for $30 million?
I would not be sad if Cody Bellinger opted out. I would tell you that because I think it would give you more flexibility. But if you're telling me you're not going to spend any of the money, or you're not going to go get a slugger, then I'd rather just keep him. Than if you're going to sit there and you're going to go on the cheap. No, I think.
Do you think is Owen Casey, as an example, ready to come up and be? I don't think Alcantara is. I mean, it was a very small sample size, but I don't think Kevin Alcantara is ready to play, 125 games in the outfield and bat 8th or 9th for the Cubs.
But just remember, again, with these young guys, it takes time. It took PCA about half a season to figure it out. It took Miguel Amaya about half a season.
I'm saying, are you willing to have one of the, the several corner outfielders, these great prospects that the Cubs have? Are you ready to go through, April to June, waiting for them to hit their stride?
For me, it's what are you offering, right? Are you telling me that, we can get Juan Soto, we're going to go for Juan Soto, then I would trade Owen Casey 5 minutes ago. Right. But if you're not going to do that, then I'd have to take a look at all the options that are on the table. And that's what we can't figure out until, am I comfortable with that? Again, Jed's going to talk about it in some of these clips. They started out good. The Cubs did in April, but then they struggled in May and June as the bullpen was trying to get sorted out, as the rotation was even trying to get sorted out. They had injuries back then. So, I mean, you could lose another year of this, and I don't know how many people are really comfortable with that. But speaking about, what happened this year, let's talk a little bit. Jed's talking about that gap. He's asked about that gap, the 10-game gap between him and the Brewers that Craig Counsell is going to bring up.
Ultimately, the only gap that matters, I think, is the standings. We and the rest of the NL Central are roughly 10 games back, and that's a significant gap. Obviously, we have to we double our efforts and work really hard to close that gap. I think one of the beauties of pro sports and these jobs is that it's clear, like that's, that is what we have to make up. It's not the first time I've been in this organization where, we were chasing a little bit. I think when we first got here, we felt that way with the Cardinals. I think they had, 3 straight years. They went to the LCS and won a World Series, and that's when we got here. And there was a significant gap. I think having a goal out in front of you, I think, is really important. We've come a long way in the last 3 years, but I do think that this year being 10 games behind them, I think that makes you realize that we have room to go. And I think that for everyone, I think it's daunting, but also I think it's exciting. We have room to go and work to do to catch those guys. They're playing today and we're not, and we have to own that, and we have to do better.
So what bothers me about that one, I'll tell you, Dustin, is that he talked about the Cardinals, and when Jed and Theo first came, it was the Cardinals. That's who you had to chase. But where the Cardinals have fallen off and where the Brewers have excelled, let's say in the last 6 to 7 years, is player development. And so when you're taking a look at the issues within the Cubs, why were the Brewers young guys seemingly more ready to play at the major league level quicker than the Cubs? That would be my question.
And those are the hardest questions to figure out, right? From where we sit, the player development aspect of everything is really something that seems so far away from us. We don't watch it enough. What goes on? Who are we know who the people are. We can look it up, right? There's a director. There's somebody that's in charge of the farm system and all that kind of stuff. But that's what's really hard to figure. And again, the prospects, right? All these great prospects. Okay, according to whom? Who says they're such great prospects, right? Are they great? The prospects are only great if they come up and deliver at the major league level, or if you're willing to trade the prospects to get somebody to play at the major league level.
I think the jump between AAA and the majors is a wider gap than it's ever been.
Yep, that's what they say. Wider than ever, right? Mm-hmm.
And so I just think that, they just have to do a better job. And that, again, I think that they have the talent. I think they've picked well. I think they've drafted well. They just got to be more ready when they come up. But again, the problem when you talk about PCA, right? It's going to take most young players a little bit of time. The trouble was you couldn't have that because Dansby struggled out of the gate. Nico struggled out of the gate. Bellinger was injured. So you had 4 or 5 guys that were way below average, and you can't expect young guys to carry the load when
Michael Busch and Pete Crow Armstrong are your leaders at the plate. And you're spending the way you're spending and committing the way you're committing, you have problems. And that was a big part of yesterday's conversation. Guys not playing up to their expectations, guys not playing up to these metrics that drive me, crazy, right? Well, the numbers said that he was supposed to do this and he didn't do it. So, well, you know what? Everybody seemed to underdeliver. When then eventually, when things were pretty much out of hand, now all of a sudden, as you pointed out earlier in the podcast, this weekend's ending series at home was a perfect example of the Cubs' entire season. Never being able to hit with runners in scoring position, very little slug, didn't hit a home run at home, and then we get into that. I mean, we're going to get to a cut eventually about, blame it on the weather. Okay. The weather is the reason that the Cubs struggled. The weather. Well, wait a minute. The weather was the same for the other team that was here at Wrigley Field. So the weather really doesn't pass the mustard.
Well, here's Jed kind of talking about, I think it was Sully who asked about, for most of the guys, by the end of the year, they hit what their average numbers said they were. Mm-hmm. But they just, again, you can't take.
But it's always about when did that happen? There used to be a lot of talk about Sammy Sosa. When did he hit the home run? Right.
Right. Aramis Ramirez was another guy that had a all the time, but at the end of the year, the numbers were the numbers. Right. But I think what Jed was hoping for is that for players to exceed what the numbers were. And that was a tough ask, but here's what Jed had to say about that.
we spent way too much time trying to think about that question. I mean, ultimately, we collectively fell into a slump in May and June that we couldn't get out of. I think in baseball, you're going to have ups and downs. That's part of the game. But that went on way too long, and we just dug ourselves a hole that was much too big. And we did it collectively. It was our offense wasn't scoring, our bullpen was struggling. It wasn't just one factor. I think it was kind of multi-factor at that point. And really, if you look at it, we got to 9 under. If you look at our records since then, we played really good baseball. I think we're 580 winning percentage over the last 3 months of the season. So I think that gives a lot of reason for optimism. But ultimately, we just dug ourselves a hole that was too big. And I am really proud of the coaching staff. I'm proud of the players for fighting and continuing to fight and build on their seasons. I think when you look at a number of the players that struggled during that period, Dansby, PCA, Amaya, those guys struggled during that stretch, and they really ended up getting back to their expected numbers. But unfortunately, the kind of shape of the season didn't allow us to make a full comeback. And, one of the hard things was I think we played really well in the second half, but the teams that we were chasing played a little better. We didn't make up ground on the Mets. We didn't make up ground on the Padres or Diamondbacks. During that period, they played a little bit better. So I think we were like 6th in baseball in winning percentage in the second half in July, August, and September. But unfortunately, the teams that we were chasing didn't falter. And credit to them, and that's why they're playing today.
Do you remember that, Dustin? The Cubs went 8-1 on a road trip in August, early September, and they didn't gain any ground. Like
no ground, zero, because the Braves and the Mets were playing out of their minds as well at that point.
And again, when you sit there and you slag off 2 months of the season, then those are
every game counts. So people like you and I who die with every single game, and it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. Well, guess what? That blow and save in April. Okay, and you finish at 1 or a half a game out of the wild card, that game mattered too.
Right, but in baseball, you're going to have blown saves. You're going to have an error that cost you. That's going to happen. What you can't do is go in prolonged slumps. You can't go for a 2-month slump. That was the killer right there. If they just couldn't get out of it. May and June were just disasters, and then just like last season, when you're 10 games back, 10 games under 500, or you're 9 games back, or you just can't, it's really hard to make up that amount of ground and expect other teams to lose. That's what you're having to do, is expect other teams to lose. And that's just not a good recipe right here. You're talking about the weather, and this is where Jed starts to talk about the weather. Let's see what Jed has to say. Where's Tom Skillen when you need him? Here we go.
Spent a lot of time evaluating that already. I think that's something we'll spend a lot of time even thinking about going forward. Pretty unusual season, I think, to evaluate the offense. We did really well, both as an offense and situationally in April. Really struggled in those areas in May and June, and then hit really well after that. So I think that a lot of the guys kind of got back to the expected numbers that they had going into the year. I think we ended up overall, 12th in baseball in run scoring. It was also really difficult to assess when you think about the way Wrigley Field played this year. Last year Wrigley was the 7th best offensive park in baseball. This year it was 29th, and after this last weekend it might be 30th. I haven't seen it since the weekend, but just a really unusual season at Wrigley that way. And I think that will be something we'll look at a lot as we try to assess the offense. Is that you have to take every factor, and I do think that it just seemed like when we were on the road, the wind would be blowing out, and when the team would come home, the wind would be blowing in. And I think it's reflected in the numbers. It's not just, it's not just the how our guys played. It's the other team as well. As you look at our pitching, I think we're 2nd in baseball in ERA at home. So just the run scoring environment in general, and Wrigley was very low, and that's something we have to look into a lot. The challenge with that is that it's the weather. There's no reason to think it's going to play like that again. It could, but it also could play like it did last year. So ultimately, when you think about offense or think about teams at Wrigley, we don't know what the weather is going to do year to year. We know that has a massive impact, but we also know that I just think building good teams, good solid teams are well-rounded is the best bet, because our ballpark is unique in the sense that there's no one way it's going to play year to year or even day to day.
He's 100% right about that. And the fact that it was a very weird year at Wrigley, that it was 29th in park, when you talk about park factors and not being an offensive park. But to me, Jed, you've been here for over a decade. Like, you don't know that by now? Like, you have to build a well-rounded team. The ballpark plays different in April and May than it does in June, July, and August, and then it changes again in September, October. The year that the Cubs won the World Series was a really warm fall. I don't know if you remember that. But you can't predict what Wrigley's going to be, but you have to be a well-rounded team. You have to be able to hit home runs. You have to be able to manufacture runs. Those are the little things, the bunting, stealing bases, hitting runs, those type of things that just, you should know that by now. This shouldn't be a shock that Wrigley can play weird season to season.
Yeah, it's not rocket science. Every time you go up to Wrigley, they talk about them looking up to see which way the flags are blowing, right? So some days the wind blows in, sometimes it doesn't. Other teams adjust. Why can't you? So global warming, Mother Nature, that's part of the Cubs' problem. Okay.
So, Dustin, again, this year it was May and June that killed us in 23, 24. So, Jed, what happened? Was there any kind of thread between why the Cubs keep getting off to a good start, but then getting into that weird slump the first third of the season?
I honestly don't think so. I mean, I think that if we had struggled in April in those years and we just didn't get off to good starts, I think that's something we look at. But, both years we've really come out of the gates well, played really well against the hard schedules in April, and then kind of fallen into a swoon after that. So it's hard. It's a hard thing to pinpoint. I don't know what we'd be doing differently in spring training or whatnot. So I don't think I think it's probably something random in terms of the shape of the season, but you're totally right that the shape of the last two seasons is pretty similar in terms of falling into a hole and then, digging like crazy to get out of it and just falling short at the end.
So, I mean, when we're looking at this right here, what could you do differently? I guess why did they do so bad in May and June, and what could you do to say hit better with runners in scoring position? And why were they able to hit good in April with runners in scoring position, but not in May and June? That's what makes no sense.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't understand. Is it the approach? Because they seemed in the first month, we talked about it on this podcast about how great the approach was, right? How the great was the approaches were so great. They were choking up on the bats. They were doing all kinds of things, right? And it just didn't seem like they continued to do that as the season progressed.
Now, we know that Craig Counsell has kind of made his feelings much more clear at the end of the season. I think he took everything in, evaluated everything, and had some comments, about being 90-win teams and about the Cubs deserving to be a better organization. And so Jed was asked about his relationship with Craig.
First of all, I couldn't be happier that he's a Cub. He's a great manager, a brilliant baseball mind. I think all of us learn from him on a daily basis, and we signed him to a 5-year deal, not a 1-year deal. And I think his impact on the organization, his impact on all of us, myself included, will continue to grow. So I'm just as glad he's here as the day we signed him, and he's going to have a huge impact on the Cubs going forward for sure.
I do like that quote right there because, again, this was Craig's first year. He signed really late. And I think that when you start in a new job, you kind of get the lay of the land, the feel. Now, where Craig goes from here, that's going to determine, in the next year and a half, next couple seasons, that to me is going to be when he can really make his impact.
Now, how weird do you think it is that Jed is in the last year of his deal while Craig is entering the second year of a 5-year deal?
Yeah, I think that, it's weird because, are you going to sit there and allow like a Juan Soto type deal? I mean, are you going to allow some guy that's a lame duck? I mean, if you're a lame duck, sign Juan Soto, that would make you look a lot better, right?
Yeah, that is a way to get yourself back into the postseason for the first time in 4 years, right?
Right. So, but again, it makes me nervous. I don't like either let him go or extend him. Sit crap or get off the pod. Those are the things that you talk about. I mean, you want the guy that's going to be. That's why Theo stepped down, right? You remember he was in the last year of his deal, and he was like, "Look, I don't want to make decisions that other people are going to have to live with when I leave." So I'm not saying that Jed's the guy or Jed's not the guy, but if you're putting him in a lame duck year, that's just a really weird dynamic to have that I'm not really thrilled about.
Yeah, it just is so odd that they don't match up. That's just different.
And we're going to finish, with this, and we'll continue with the presser later on in the week. But, the question was asked about both Jed and Tom's frustration level.
Yeah, I think I said at the very beginning, I think that kind of the general sense of the organization is, I think everyone's optimistic about our future. I think we've put ourselves in terrific position, but I think everyone's disappointed that in the way the season played out. I think we showed at times for long stretches that we're a really good team, but ultimately, like, it's pretty binary. We're not playing today. I'm having a press conference today. And I think that, from Tom on down, I think there's a level of disappointment in that. And so, of course, there's frustration. I think there should be frustration when you fall short of a goal that you set a year ago.
So for me, I never felt like they played other than that 9-game stretch at the end of August and September when they didn't gain any ground. I never felt like they played consistently good baseball. Like
there was no consistency whatsoever. I mean, at one point they could hit. The only thing that was consistent, Crawly, for the most part, was the starting pitching. Okay, at one point the bullpen was really bad. At another point, you and I both fell for this improved bullpen that really wasn't that improved. It was better, but it nearly wasn't as good as the numbers were acting like it was. And down the stretch, it fell apart, and guys were out, and more guys got hurt. And that's going to be the biggest thing is how, if you had a lights out closer, if you had the closer that the Oakland A's had, the Cubs might be playing today. They might be playing right now.
And that's the tough thing. But I never, ever felt like, wow, this team just really wowed me. Not even from the beginning. It'd be like, you'd have 2 wins in a row, and then you just have a clunker. Remember that one? I think they had like an 8-0 lead to San Diego in the beginning of the year, and they blew that one. It's just, every time I felt like the Cubs took 2 steps forward, they would take 3 steps back. And that's kind of where I am. And so the next time that you and I talk, there were some moves made on the coaching staff. There was talk about payroll and about some of the young guys. So we'll hit the second half of this because it really is interesting stuff. But, there's a lot of questions that we don't have answers to that hopefully, we'll see in the upcoming months.
You are listening to episode 79 of season number 3, the end of the 2024 Cubs season. Don't forget, listen, download, review, subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. Leave us a 5-star review if you don't mind, and you can email us, flythew670@gmail.com. And don't forget, you can watch us. That's right. Watch Crawly and I do this on the 670 The Score YouTube page. So some sad news yesterday afternoon, Crawly. We learned that Pete Rose, the MLB's all-time hit leader, passed away, age of 83. I did just see a note roll that natural causes for the cause of death, hypertension, and some heart disease. He also had just appeared in an autograph show in Nashville. Former teammates Tony Perez, George Foster, Davey Concepcion, the Big Red Machine.
Yeah, a guy like Pete, for me, I would be going to autograph shows all the time, and Pete was a regular on that circuit. Like, if you think about 2 guys that truly created that circuit, you have to go with Mickey Mantle and Pete Rose. And, I put it on my Twitter at Crawly Cubs the other day, a funny story. My dad grew up, obviously, in the shadows of Wrigley Field and went to games all the time. And that was when you only had, the National League and American League. There was no divisions. Later on, they went into, different divisions, but my dad always saw the Reds come to town and Pittsburgh came to town. And there was 2 guys that were non-Cubs that my dad fell in love with. And one of them was Roberto Clemente and the other was Pete Rose. And so when my dad turned 60, the whole family went out to Vegas to celebrate. And Pete Rose was signing at Caesars, at Field of Dreams at Caesars. And I saw him and I tell my mom, I'm like, hey, let's get Dad a signed photo from Pete Rose because he had photos for sale, and he'd autograph them. And I got my Cubs gear on and I go strolling up to Pete Rose and I'm like, hey, Pete, how are you? He's like, hey, are you a big Cub fan? And I'm like, yeah, my dad's a big Cub fan too, but you're one of his favorite players of all time. And he goes, can I tell you a joke? I said, go for it, Pete. What do you got? He goes, what did Jesus Christ say to the Chicago Cubs? I said, I don't know, Pete. What did Jesus Christ say to the Chicago Cubs? He said, don't do anything until I get back. So that's my Pete Rose story. And
very good, Pete.
Classic. And I don't know if you know this, because this happened in 1985. If you remember the craze about breaking Ty Cobb's record, right?
Yep. I went to a couple games right around there with my grandfather. Yep.
Right. He tied the record.
At
Wrigley Field, and he broke the record in Cincinnati off Eric Shaw, the one that hit Andre Dawson in the face, if you remember that.
No.
Right? But here's the thing, right? And this is what people don't realize. This came out later. Recent research shown that 2 of Ty Cobb's hits were counted twice. Okay. So MLB recognized Rose's record on September 11, 1985. But if Cobb's record was reduced to 4,189 hits, you take those 2 hits away that were counted twice, he technically broke the record September 8th, 1985 at Wrigley Field.
That's pretty interesting. Good. That's good. That's good trivia there, Crawly. And then on top of, do we want to get into the Pete Rose Hall of Fame thing here, or are we holding off on that? You and I had a nice little text exchange. Had an odd caller that worked on the Dowd report that said that if he didn't bet on the Reds every day, that was cheating because that means he was betting against them. Don't agree with that. But I think now that Pete Rose time has come and he had a lifetime ban, his life is no more, that he definitely at the very, very least deserves to be back on the ballot. And I think once back on the ballot, he will go in. Nobody's ever going to forget that, he was suspended for time for gambling, but I think he's, paid the price.
I agree with Pete Rose going into the Hall of Fame under the condition that I do think it needs to be mentioned on the plaque. I do think that he was, I think that's, tell the whole story. Tell the whole story. Don't whitewash it. And I guess my thing, and I've gotten into this argument a million times, and I tell people, A, I like Pete. B, he was one of my dad's favorite players. But Dustin, you and I have both been to plenty of clubhouses. I've been to over 15, 16 ballparks, and I always do the tours. I've been to Wrigley. There was one rule that was posted on the door. Okay. And you may agree with it or disagree with it, but it didn't say anything about beating your wife or shooting up heroin or any of that stuff.
None of that stuff's funny, but the way you just said it kind of.
Right. But think about it. There was one rule that would get you banned from the game. And every year before the season would start, a union rep would come out and talk to both clubhouses to remind them of that one rule. Don't bet on baseball. Now, that being said, Pete was given many chances to come clean, and he never did. And Dustin, you're a father. I'm a father. We have kids. The one thing sometimes when a kid says they're sorry, the question you ask are you really sorry for what you did, or are you sorry that you got caught? And I guess for me, I never felt that Pete Rose ever wanted to come clean until they had absolute solid evidence proving otherwise. I don't think he felt sorry for what he did. I don't think he understands the damage it could do to the game. And I think if he would have come out straight honest and he's been given other chances by other commissioners, but he refused to say he wouldn't bet on baseball again. Yeah. And so I don't really feel sorry for him not going to the Hall of Fame. I really don't. And I would say, and people, Crawly, you hang out with this player, that, but I don't care who it is. If you've done steroids, if you've done gambling, any of that stuff, I really don't have a lot of time to really feel sorry for you not being in the Hall of Fame. Now, I don't think you should be a pariah and completely, again, to say Pete Rose could never come back to Cincinnati would be ridiculous. But again, the Hall of Fame is different. And so to me, I have no problem putting him now. He had a lifetime ban. His life is over. But again, was banned from baseball for betting on the game. Put it on.
But during his lifetime. Lifetime is over.
Put it on the plaque. I have no problem with him getting there, but put it on the plaque. Be honest about it.
I can live with that. Again, with all the gambling that's going on in baseball and, the owners and the teams all involved with, legal sports gambling, it's on the app. You can't get away from it. I support it. I indulge in it a little bit here and there. Let's just not be hypocrites, I guess is my point.
There's a lot of hypocrisy. I understand it, but there is rules against gambling, and there has been someone that has been banned since that betting online. So the rule's still in place. You can't do it. So,
all right. Monday, Crawly, was supposed to be an off day, but we had Hurricane Helene. Mets and Dodgers had to play a split doubleheader. It was actually the Mets and Braves down in Atlanta, and there were 3 teams whose playoff lives were on the line. So the Braves win, they're in. Mets win, they're in. But whoever won the first game, if they won the second game, then the D-backs would have gotten in.
Well, I just love it. No, first of all, let me just give my condolences to everyone at Hurricane Helene. Awful disaster. It was just a crazy day of baseball, though, to sit there and realize three teams' fates were hanging on the balance of this doubleheader. And game 2 was starting 40 minutes after the conclusion of game 1. So MLB advises both the Mets and the Braves that whoever wins game 1, don't do the champagne celebration, none of that. Be ready to get back on the field, get something to eat and go. So, that game 1 was probably one of the all-time great games. The Braves are up 3-0 in the 8th. The Mets come roaring back, score 6 runs on 2 doubles, 3 singles, and a 2-run homer by Brandon Nimmo. Mets take a 6-3 lead, looking good. Braves don't give up with 2 outs and runners at first and third. Pinch hitter Jared Kelenic singled on a ball. Pete Alonso stopped, but no one covers first base. Diaz doesn't cover first base, and the Braves leads cut to 5-4. Michael Harris draws a walk. Bases are loaded for Ozzie Albies. 2-run homer earlier in the game. He hits a double that clears the bases. The Braves retake the lead in 7-6. Dustin, 10 runs in 1 inning. That was more runs in 1 inning than the Cubs and Reds scored in 28 innings of baseball this weekend.
Yeah, it was a crazy. I got in front of the TV in the 6th, and it was absolutely crazy. I am so glad that I lucked myself into sitting down and watching that, and then I couldn't pull myself away from it until it was over.
Right, and with 1 out in the 9th and a runner on, Francisco Lindor, you remember him against with Cleveland against the Cubs in the World Series. He hits a 2-run blast to put the Mets back up 8-7. New York's able to hold on to punch their ticket to the postseason. But to make matters worse for the Braves, and the Diamondbacks had to be excited, Chris Sale scratched with a back spasm. But the Braves did come back to win. They beat the Mets 3-0 in game 2. So Atlanta gets the 5th seed. Mets get the 6th seed. Diamondbacks go home. Dustin, let's take a look really quick here at this. And I'm curious to see, when we take a look at the postseason, I guess my question would be, who do you like when we look at the standings? And I know a couple games are kind of going on now. I haven't had a chance to see them. If we look, let's start with the AL side. I think the Royals won today, but you have Detroit as a 6th seed.
Yeah, Royals were a 1-0 winner. Pitching duel, but of course the only run batted in from the Royals by Bobby Witt.
So you got the Royals at 5 taking on the Orioles at 4. And the winner of Detroit-Houston takes on Cleveland. The winner of KC-Baltimore. Let's just do first round, and we'll come back to the DS later. But right now, Dustin, if you were to have your pick, who advances, Atlanta, Detroit or Houston, or KC or Baltimore?
Well, I think the Tigers are just on a heater right now. I do, and it's a little unfair. They're up 1-0. I do like the Tigers, but if the Astros were to, I like whoever wins the 6-3 matchup to also take care of the Indians if we're going to go that far. I know the Guardians, but for the podcast, I'm going to call them the Indians. And, I'm pulling for the Orioles, but I think the Yankees will be too strong.
So on this right here, I got Detroit advancing, and then I got the Orioles. I think they got to get that monkey.
So we're same. Detroit and the Baltimore baseball team for both of us.
All right. Now this is where we have a little bit of skin in the game here. 6 seed Mets versus 3 seed Brewers. And we have the 5 seed at Atlanta versus the 4 seed San Diego. Who you got?
Well, as a Cub fan, are you really allowed to cheer for either the Mets or the Brewers? But I almost want to stick it to Craig Counsell and wake up Jed and everybody over at Clark and Addison. So I'm actually hoping that the Brewers can advance. And I think the Padres are on a heater too, and I'm sick of the Braves.
I think that the doubleheader and the emotion and having to travel all these cities is going to get to both the Braves and the Mets. I also have the Brewers and the Padres advancing. Dustin,
Padres, Dodgers in the NLDS, that would be wild.
That it's absolutely. And, it just frustrates me, Dustin, when I look at this and I keep saying to myself, all these teams are in, but the Cubs are not, Right. And we're going to still be here. We're going to break down the second half of Jed Hoyer's press conference on the next episode, and we'll be able to kind of take a look at how this postseason is going. But I still love me baseball. And I think the fact that the Cubs were out of it, like halfway through September, it's easier for me. When the Cubs lose like they did last year, like on the last weekend, too hard for me to watch the postseason. I hate it. But this, I can sit back and enjoy and just say, like, the Cubs weren't good enough to be one of these teams.
We're not good enough, Crawly. All right, that's a wrap. Don't forget to listen, download, review, subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. Follow on the socials. We are on Facebook. We are on Instagram. We are on X, Twitter, whatever you're calling it these days. flythew670gmail.com. That's where you can email Crawly and I. Let's get some emails going. What do you guys want to know? What are your predictions on the offseason? And you can watch us, that's right, by subscribing to the 670 The Score YouTube channel. Crawly, enjoy a couple days, and let's get back together soon and really dig in on this Jed Hoyer. And who knows, I'm expecting that we're going to hear from Craig Counsell before the week is out as well.
It'll be exciting. You know, the Cubs season is over, but we're just getting cooking. Go Cubs! Hey guys, it's Crawly. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Go Cubs!